So to introduce, we're getting ready for the edTPA, and as a faculty person in early childhood, I truly have been getting ready for this edTPA all year. I went to a conference in San Diego, I believe, to learn a little bit about it, and so now I'm going to share that with you. We were fortunate enough to actually pilot the edTPA in January, and thanks to Jody Shong, who's an early childhood student in the program, in the 2011 program, where she was able to do her pre-student teaching starting in January with Jamie in the infant toddler lab. So I brought her here today so that she can kind of give you some of her experiences through the edTPA. And so we've been getting ready for it. The administration, the director of the School of Ed, as well as our assessment coordinator, Tony Beersley, we've all been preparing this. As you prepare anything, it's you try and implement some little pieces to see how they work in order to make sure that when it's time to go full-blown, it works effectively and efficiently. One of the things that we've done, which you all encountered this semester, was the new template for lesson plans, which, let's just admit, has been a real challenge, right, for all of us. But I think that we've grown from that challenge, and so we're going to use those pieces today to sort of explain it a little bit more. Oh, I got to try this technology out. There we go. So let's get ready for the edTPA, and this is part one. I want to talk to you about the big picture, about exactly what it is, and about some of the nuts and bolts. Okay, when you hear nuts and bolts, I was going to have Rolf give me a big bag of nuts and bolts so you could visually see it, but your imaginations are so good, I think that you understand. So I want to go through some of the big nuts and bolts of the edTPA. Now, when you see the word edTPA, okay, the little ed, I always think of my dad, that was his name. Okay, that's not what it is. So what do you think it involves as far as education goes? What do you think it stands for? The ED. Thank you. Could you press your button? Thanks. What do you think, Rachel?
Education.
Good. So to shorten that up, education, ed. Okay, TPA stands for Teacher Performance Assessment. Okay, we've talked about assessments in our class this semester. You've also heard a lot about it in Melody's classes, right? So we kind of have a handle on assessment, on formative assessment as well as summative assessment. Now, when we're talking about performance assessments, I want you to think and talk in your small groups a little bit. What performance assessments have I collected and you've done in this particular course? This is where you can talk to each other, you know, to get the answer, and then, yeah. There you go. Okay, everybody ready? I love how you're raising your hand. That never really happens either. Jennifer, what do you have?
Our Northwoods reflection.
Okay, the reflection. One of the biggest pieces in education as teachers is to be reflective. So after you've taught your lesson with the children, you're reflective about that, right? Good. What other assessments are we collecting in this course? Tess, you had your hand up.
Our professional journal reflections, like reading it and then critiquing it and understanding how it will help us in the future.
Okay, excellent. So the journal reflections that you've done, you've read 5 journal articles and you've reflected on those. That's another form of assessment. What else? What's the big one, Melanie?
Our lesson plans?
Yes, the one that has caused the most stress for all of us, correct? But the lesson plan had a lot of pieces that are really important and tie into the edTPA, and we'll be talking about that. Any other assessments, performance assessments that we've done in class that you can think of? How about your literacy terms? Okay, in order to teach literacy, you have to know a little bit about those, so you have to know what the terminology is. Okay, so what's the point of having those assessments? What does that tell you? All of those assessments, what does that tell you as a student? Melanie. I'm sorry, Jennifer.
How we become reflective practitioner.
Okay, what else does it tell you? Every time you get something graded and it's handed back, what is that telling you? Shelley?
It's telling you what you need to work on in the future.
Okay, not only is it telling you what you need to work on, what else does it tell you, Nikki? Oh, okay, let me relieve that pressure. Would you talk among yourselves? Okay, I know. It's like you're being taped, right? I get it. Talk among yourselves. What else do those assessments tell you? Not just what you need to work on. What else does it tell you? Julie.
What you already know? No?
Things that you already know, correct. Excellent, excellent. It's the pieces that you don't really have to work on. Okay. What do your assessments tell me as the teacher? Okay, be honest about that. Come on. Lexi, what do you think? When I score all of your lesson plans and all of your grades, what is that telling me as the teacher?
It tells you how we're doing in your class and what needs to be retaught or relooked at.
Okay, it tells me how you're doing, what I need to reteach you that you're not catching, okay, and also the things that you know. So those assessment things are really, really crucial. So you can talk about performance assessments as a student, and you can also talk about them as a teacher. So those assessments really are twofold. They're telling me how I teach, and they're telling me what you learn. Okay, both things are very important in this edTPA. When you're looking at this big picture, what we're doing about those assessments is really, and what you're going to do is scan some of those assessments into your electronic portfolio, right? Because that portfolio at the very end is going to show what you've learned through all of your years as early childhood pre-service students. And so at the very end, when you have this electronic portfolio, part of that portfolio will be part of this teacher ed assessment as well. So it all will tie together. So that's sort of the big picture. One of the things that you have to remember seeing this big picture, in the fall of 2015, every education student on this campus will be required to do the edTPA. That's huge. Now some of you are thinking, phew, won't affect me. Yes, it will, because we're going to be continually piloting it. And I think it's important for you as students in this program to offer me and us some of your comments and your suggestions as to how we can embed this into the program to make sure that everyone who graduates from UW Stout will be proficient in being a teacher. That's really the huge thing. So when you thought back about what you wanted to be when you grew up, okay, you had all kinds of options, right? Okay, for me it was pretty easy. I knew from being in the convent that I was just going to be a teacher. That was a given. When you think about what you're going to be in this profession, you're thinking about some of the knowledge that you have, some of the skills that you have, and as well as some of the dispositions that you have. I was raised with this influence by my aunt that was a nun, and it was for sure that I was going to be a teacher. I felt that I had the skills to be a teacher because I babysat. And I could entertain children. I thought that would be easy, right? And I also had the disposition because I loved children and I had a passion for teaching and a nurturing kind of side of me, which maybe some of you don't know, but I do have it. Okay, so as you're thinking about why you became a teacher, you have to think about some of those skills and some of those dispositions and some of those, that knowledge that you have. What's really important is that when I became a teacher, it was easy. I thought, well, this will be an easy thing for me to do. Okay, teaching back then when I went into teaching, it was just something that most people did. I think teaching was held in high esteem. There was a lot of respect. I remember my dad saying to me, if ever the teacher says you did something wrong, don't think I'm going to take your side. I'm going to take the teacher's side. So I think back then there was a very high respect for teachers. I think the profession was somewhat easy. You signed up, you went to class, and I became a teacher, learning what I had to do throughout the program. But I think now that because there's such a focus on teacher accountability, that we're really in the limelight, and we really have to prove that we are really competent, and that what we're doing is truly a profession that's rigorous, and that we've gone through a lot of different steps to get where we are, and that we're really good at what we do. When you take a look at this slide, you can take a look at these two different professions, right? What's the one on the left? Basketball. What kind of skills do you need as a basketball player? Okay, agility, good. What else do you need? Coordination. What kind of knowledge do you need? Okay, one piece of knowledge that you need is you have to be able to get the basket in the hoop, right? Because then you'll get a point. Okay. What kind of disposition do you need? How many of you were ever in athletics of any kind? What kind of disposition did you need? Competitive, good, what else? Teamwork, excellent, what else? You had to sort of work for your own self and setting up goals, but you also had to be a part of the team, correct? Okay, what's the profession on the right-hand side? Pole vaulting? Okay, what kind of pole vaulting, is that what we decided it was? It looks to me like it's, so yeah, tightrope walker, yeah, okay. What kind of a skill do you need for pole vaulting? How many of you were pole vaulters? Oh, were you, Liz? Tell us about the skills that you needed.
Well, I did it for a year, but
Okay.
I don't know. It's an individual sport. I mean, you're on a track team, but you're trying to get points as an individual placing
Okay.
in your event.
Okay, so you're always setting up goals for yourself as an individual, correct? Okay, but you're also part of a team.
Right.
Okay.
Barely.
What kind of, talk to me a little bit about your disposition. As you're running to try and get over that pole, what kind of what was in your mind?
Hold on tight.
Hold on tight, yeah, okay.
You have to break through that fear barrier. 'Cause
Okay.
You're going 10, 12, 13 feet up in the air.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
And then what kind of knowledge did you have before you even started that?
It's a lot of physics, actually.
Okay,
Like when
Okay.
to jump off the ground, how to arch the pole.
okay, excellent. So anything that anyone chooses, any profession, there has to be some knowledge that you need, some skills that you need, and some disposition that you need. I think if I chose to be a doctor, okay, I never chose that because I wouldn't have been a very good doctor. I didn't feel like I had the knowledge, nor did I really have the skill. But I think now about those particular professions, and sometimes when you're choosing the right kind of a doctor, you can go out and technology has allowed them to create some sort of a PowerPoint or some sort of interview that shows you exactly what they know. They talk to you about how good they are at their skill. We don't have that opportunity as teachers. Okay, so sometimes in school districts now, they have websites, okay, and you can click on that teacher's website, and sometimes the teacher will talk about what they know. This edTPA is going to be a demonstration of the fact that you really went through a rigorous process to become a teacher. It's going to be your showcase, sort of, or your way of saying to the world, I'm ready to be a teacher. Jody, do you want to add something to that?
You all are sitting here not because you just waltzed in here. You worked really hard to get into college. I know you all did. And just like these professions that you're seeing on the screen now, edTPA is rigorous, but it's also going to be a showcase of who you are. You're going to put yourself out there. Anything, and you've all accomplished things in your life, anything that you look back on right now that you've really accomplished and you're extremely proud of, didn't you work hard for? Didn't you put a lot of time and effort into that? That's what this is. And that's what's going to be for you. You're going to take this and you're going to run with it and you're going to be really proud of it in the end. I was leery in the beginning too, but I'm very proud of what I've accomplished and what I've learned through this process.
So you know how I harp on you about evidence of student learning, right? And I said to you in every lesson plan, you need to have some concrete evidence. This is going to be your concrete evidence, this edTPA, that says I can do it and I'm a really good teacher. So you're probably wondering exactly what this edTPA is. So I have a cocktail definition for you. Don't you like that? Okay. What? Good thing you didn't press your button on that. Okay. So if the formal definition is that the Teacher Performance Assessment, or edTPA, is a student-centered multiple measure assessment of teaching. Okay, what does that mean? That's a mouthful, right? It means that in your assessment, in your showcase, it's going to show multiple levels, multiple assessments that prove that you are the very best teacher you can be. Okay? It's also designed to be educative. That's a fun word to say 5 times. Okay, what that means is it's educating. It's educating you, and it's educating the teachers who are teaching you. So it's a process. And it's also going to demonstrate your effective teaching, but also the fact that students are learning. So it's a huge kind of a thing as you think about this cocktail definition. But what's happening is in this lesson plan piece, let's take for example, that you've done in the class. It's been an educative process for you, hasn't it? Let's think back to that very first time I handed back your lesson plans. Should have worn my bulletproof vest, right? Now take a look at the lesson plan I handed back to you today. There's been improvement, right? We've all learned from that. And we've learned because of the feedback I've given you and because of the peer feedback that you've gotten from one another. So you've supported each other along the way, even though you didn't really know what you were doing. All of this is the process of the edTPA as we embed it within the program. Okay, so why is this being done? You're probably wondering, why are we doing this now and what brought this on? I think, again, because of the accountability piece for teachers. I think that we have to show that we are really professional and that we really jumped a lot of hoops to get to where we are today. I think this edTPA will show that our profession is rigorous and that our preparation for this profession went far beyond what it used to. Okay, it's going to have that evidence. I think also because it's nationwide, it's showing us that the assessment that we are doing and what you are showing is showing everybody that you are qualified to be a teacher. Okay, so as a novice teacher, you're learning on the way, but you've also pulled together a lot of pieces within the program that you've gone through in college to prove that you can do that. One of the things about this is that it's focused on student learning more so than you as a teacher, even though they're sort of entwined. Usually when we sent students out student teaching, it was, and even when you first did your reflections way back in DAP, kindergarten primary, when you did a lesson, we asked you to talk about what went well in the lesson, right? What you did well, what you could have done differently. The focus is a little bit different now. Yes, that you still have to ask yourself, as I do in your assessments, what did I do well, could I have done differently, what do I need to reteach? But the focus becomes student learning, so it's not about you anymore, but it's about student learning. You're going to show evidences that your child learned. And I think that's one of the major things about why this is being done. Okay, now it's time for you to think again. I want you to think about the most amazing teacher you have ever had in your career, whether it was kindergarten or someone in college or high school. Think about that teacher in terms of what made them successful. Okay, so I'm going to give you just a few minutes to talk in your groups about what made that teacher successful in your eyes. Okay, are we all set? Okay, Allie, give me one example of what made a successful teacher for you.
They can reach us as students and know who we are.
So Heidi, you mean like that? What do you mean you can reach them?
Well, they can relate to us
Okay.
and make connections. And
Okay, great, Grace. Great, Grace.
I said that just being passionate and energetic and happy every day for life and wanting every child to succeed.
Okay, happy every day. There's a motto. Okay, what else? Yes, Rachel.
We said that they understand that people and humans is generally make mistakes, and that's why they're here, and they don't hold that against you.
Okay,
It happens.
wonderful. One more. Ashley.
We said that teachers are dedicated on teaching us and giving us like the best opportunities that we can have.
Okay, perfect. Here's some other examples which many of you have said. One of the points of a successful teacher is really they engage students learning, right? When you go into a classroom, you can tell a teacher that's really powerful. Every student's engaged, they're not on their laptop. Just kidding. Wow, that was the joke you missed for today. Another thing is that they create intellectually ambiguous tasks, which means that integration piece that you're learning so well to do. Even though I'm teaching sinking and floating, I'm integrating it within all kinds of other things as well. Some of the other things is that you're constantly assessing student learning. That's huge, that assessment piece. From those assessments, I'm collecting the data and reteaching the things that I need. I think also that you are scaffolding and you're supporting student learning. So those are some let's see, definitions of what a successful teacher will be. That's what you want to be, right? Yes, everyone should say, absolutely, I want to be a successful teacher, because if you're not going to be a successful teacher, you won't be getting a job. So we want everyone to be successful as they proceed through the program. So I want you to pause and ponder for just a little bit. At the very end of this program, or even at the end of every class, what do you want to show others about your teaching knowledge, your skills, and your abilities? From this particular course, what do you want to pull that's going to show somebody that you are a good teacher? What's one thing that you will use? For sure. Your lesson plans. Thanks, Lindsay. Absolutely. That's one thing, because you're planning and you're assessing and you're instructing. All of those pieces in that lesson plan. The second thing is, what do you want others to know about your good teaching? What are you going to stand out for? You know, what's the one thing? And here's where that reflection piece comes in. You have to reflect about what you do well and the things that you have to sort of work on. But what do you want others to note you for? Your compassion, your ability to tie in, integrate. You know, what do you want to be noted for? Think about those things now, because in this edTPA you can truly demonstrate that with the artifacts and the things that you're collecting. And also, what would you collect as evidence to show your strengths and show that students are learning and your own abilities as a teacher? Jody.
I went into this, Dr. Jill asked me, and I said, well, of course, you know, I'll do this. Thinking I can do this. I've taught, I've done lesson plans, I've reflected, I've done all of this, thinking that it's not really going to affect my teaching that much. I was wrong. I was dead wrong. And it was so nice to go into something and know that at my age, being the non-traditional student and being in this for a while, that I can learn something new, that I can help my students and help myself in the teaching. I needed to go into it knowing where I was as a teacher and knowing I needed to grow. I needed to know where the students were academically, where they needed to go or where they were at, what they were struggling with. You also have 2 focus children in the edTPA within your class. That doesn't mean you ignore the class. You work the class as a whole, but you have 2 focus children that you look at and you evaluate, and you do a lot of things for them as well. And I will talk about one of my focus children at the end when we get into the technology piece. But I can't stress this enough, that you are amazing women and you'll be amazing teachers. But it's up to you to show people what you can do. And in order to do that, take these pieces and do them and strive to do your best. And then you have this to present, not only to, you know, Pearson's if it gets turned in at this point, or for yourself to document how you are a teacher. Because nobody's going to be your strongest advocate, and you are. You're going to be the one that stands up and says, look at what I can do. And I get really excited toward the end of this as well, because we really touched on some children and their learning. So I got very excited and very passionate about it. So it's up to you what you make of it.
I think I can't stress enough that as you continue through the program, you begin to identify the things you do well. And even when you're student teaching, I ask you, what's the best thing that you do? And what things do you have to work on? Because that's that reflective practitioner piece. But you have to be able to identify it and own it. And one of the hardest things for me, and I think for you as well, is to take that constructive feedback. We've had that experience in class a little bit. You know, we've been kind of peer reviewing our lesson plans. It's hard to take sometimes because you've spent so much time on it. But I think if you can put everything in focus about how children are going to learn, here's a lesson plan and it's well developed because it's going to show me what children can learn. Not about you. You have to kind of separate that. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we have. Just so you know, I said before that this is sort of a national assessment that's coming down the pike. Right now there's about 21 or 22 states in the whole U.S. that have jumped in on this edTPA. Please don't think that this is just something that Stout decided this was perfect. It's kind of a national push. And again, it's about selling the best teachers and making sure that you're ready for this profession. So I want you to see where we're at. What we've done is, you know, the state superintendent has said this is what we're going to do. So all of the schools in Wisconsin are working towards this. Many of us are at different points in implementing this within our schools, but we'll all be there by 2015 because we have to be. Here's our timeline for UW Stout as far as the edTPA. As I said, Jody did it in January. In the fall, we are going to have 2 students that are going to pilot this and 2 cooperating teachers from the field that are going to help us as well. Jamie was excellent because she was right on campus and I was able to work with her, but we're branching it out now to the cooperating teachers out in the field. This will be done during your student teaching placements. So in your kindergarten or primary student teaching placements, this is where it's going to happen. As the semesters continue, you might think, phew, I'm off the hook. I'm just going to encourage you to do this. If there's a pilot and I'm looking for students, sign up for it. You are able to sign up for it and there's no risk for you. Okay, it's a high stakes kind of thing for the fall of 2015 because if those students don't pass this, they won't be getting a teaching license. But if you're truly, wanting to be the very best teacher, you'll be getting the feedback and knowing how to pull this together. So I ask you and encourage you to really be a part of the pilots that are coming down the pipe. Just so you know, this isn't something I'm thinking about by myself. As you can see in this cyclical diagram, there's all kinds of key players to make sure that you are successful. So you're the teacher candidate. We're including cooperating teachers. We're including university supervisors. We're including the administrators in the school who have to okay a lot of the things so that they know what's going on. Of course, the director of the School of Ed and the assessment coordinator and all of the programs within UW-Stout, the education programs are working together. So you can see it's not just a one-man show, but it's everybody collaborating to make sure that you're successful. Okay, this is huge, okay? This is the nuts and bolts of the edTPA. If you notice, there's 3 main pieces: planning, instruction, and assessment. Where have you done that already? Come on, that's an easy question. Go ahead, Melanie.
Northwoods.
Okay, at Northwoods. What have you used as Northwoods as your tool? Not tool, I shouldn't say, but what's the basis of what you've taken to Northwoods that shows that you can plan, instruct, and assess? Your lesson plan, perfect. One of the things with the edTPA in each education program, there's a different sort of a focus. Okay, for early childhood, the focus is language development. If you look on the outside, it's sort of the thing that drives this whole edTPA. Now, it being in my class, you know the importance of language development for children and how rapid it takes off with young children. So the focus for the early childhood edTPA really is the language development. Looking on this cyclical process, you know that you have to plan the lessons. And then after that careful planning, you instruct it. And then you look at the evidence that shows that you've assessed the child. You looked at the things that worked and the pieces that didn't work so that you can make those improvements for the next lesson. Remember that piece in the lesson plan that was a real killer for you, you know, the prior learning type of piece? You have to know children's development and you have to know what they know ahead of time so that you're not reteaching it. So all of that becomes part of that cyclical process. Also, if you take a look at that cyclical process, we call those tasks within the edTPA. So task 1 is planning, task 2 is instruction, and task 3 is assessment. And looking at the characteristics underneath each task are the things that you'll be collecting that will showcase that you absolutely are competent with each of those different tasks. Did you want to add something to that, Jody?
No, just that when you take each task, I mean, break it down. It helped me tremendously to not look at the big picture all at once, to concentrate on what I'm passionate about, and that's the children's learning, and then plug that into each one of the things that I needed to do.
So one thing that I want to just point out to you is in the instruction piece is video clips. Okay, that's something that we haven't asked students to do very often. And Jody's going to kind of make sense of this a little bit more, but when you're student teaching, you're going to be videotaping a lot of your lessons because there's a lot of learning that can go on by videotaping and seeing exactly what happened. And that's a piece that we've really missed within the program. We haven't really asked you to videotape. In each of these tasks as well, there's a commentary. And so if you think about what that word commentary means, it means that you're talking about what you're going to do. One of the biggest pieces of this edTPA is that you know how to write. And you write concisely and you write precisely for what you're doing. So you'll have a planning commentary, an instruction commentary, and then of course the assessment commentary. Some of the things in our lesson plans right now, I've kind of said you got to cut that back. It's got to be more specific. So those are the things that we'll be working on. When you look at those 3 tasks, the overall thing, what we're doing is really analyzing your effectiveness as a teacher. That's going to be showcased within those 3 tasks, as well as thinking about the development of language for young children. There you go. What's that over on the right-hand side, your favorite thing? A rubric, right? Each of these tasks have 5 rubrics. So this is very specific about what we're looking for as far as proficiency goes. So you're probably thinking, oh, this is a lot of information. And you're probably thinking, so what's in it for me? What will I learn? Again, let's go back to that idea of having it be educative and predictive. It's an assessment for you as well as about student learning. So one of the first things is this whole process is going to gauge your strengths and your weaknesses, not only of you as a teacher, but the main focus of you as for your students.
When I look at this, my strengths and my weaknesses, I'm passionate about children. I'm passionate about literacy. I love to read. I'm a great performer. I love to perform for the kids. But I also needed to look at, I needed to grow as a teacher. I needed to look at my weaknesses as well. Not only that, but before you start getting in depth into this, you need to look at your students. Like I said, you have 2 focused children, and you need to know where their language is as it pertains to the whole class. And then Jamie's class, or the Inspire room, is 100% language all day long. I mean, that's where those group of children are at. But there was no real assessment that showed me, or I could check off, saying where they were, what they could do, what they could say, what they couldn't say. Was it receptive or responsive? None of that. So I went digging on the internet and found a language assessment that worked for that. And I do believe Jamie is still using that. That's something that she's going to implement into their portfolios. So I did that with my 2 focused children. And then Jamie also had portfolios of each of the children. If you've been in the infant toddler lab or had a chance to look at those. But it talks about where they are in their development and where their range comes and goes. So I really concentrated on the 2, I looked at the whole, but I concentrated on the 2 focused children. So I knew, okay, we're done with that piece of it. Now where are they at now? And where can I comfortably lead them without pushing too much? So that was the strength and weakness part.
And I think each of you are doing that every week with your child from Northwoods. Yeah. You're looking at the strengths that they have with the skill that you're working on and some of the areas that they still need to work on. That pre-assessment piece that you did with them kind of indicates some of the things that they know, but then you also have provided that planning piece that will provide for the student that already gets that piece and for those that are struggling. So you sort of know that piece. As Jody talks about 2 focused children, that's one piece of the edTPA. There is also the accountability that you'll have for the whole group. You know, it's real easy now, you just have 1 student, so if that student's belligerent, you kind of know how to deal with them, but you multiply that times 25, because a lot of you are going to be in a classroom of 25. So we're going to prepare you not only for the 2 focused children, but also for the whole group and to assess their learning. The second thing that you'll learn is to reflect on your craft of teaching, because it really is a craft, isn't it? Okay, they should have well, they do have a website, Pinterest, right? You're learning all kinds of education things, right? So it's sort of a craft. That's what they're kind of demonstrating on Pinterest. It is a craft. But it's a craft of teaching and the impact that you'll have on student learning. So you'll be able to identify those things.
And it's a culmination of what you've done here at Stout. So you're taking everything that you've poured your heart into for the last 4 years, your learning, your skills, the activities, the different things that you've done here that have really worked with your students, you're going to revisit that and use that again. The writing commentaries, Dr. Jill had mentioned that don't be afraid to go visit the writing, it's here on Stout.
Writing lab.
The writing lab. Tremendous place. I mean, it can help you a lot as well. But you're going to be doing a lot of writing in your planning and your instruction and in your assessment. You're going to put down what you saw the children do, what they need to do, where they need to go, how you could have changed it, how you could have made it just a tad bit better, or how you could have pulled back a little bit at a different place. But through your writings and through your planning, you'll be more prepared. You will walk in there saying, I've got this. This is, this is something, you've thought of all the things that could happen. And you've narrowed it down to, this is what I want to teach the class. And that way you can pull more tricks out of your bag. You have tons of them that you've used up to this point. So you'll be able to use more of them as well as your planning continues.
The third point, which I think is really huge, how many of you have done Benchmark 2 or will be doing Benchmark 2? Okay, one of the things that they ask you in Benchmark 2 is, your philosophy of education. And you have to fall back upon what theory, supports that philosophy. That theory is something that runs through your teaching as well. So you have to be thinking about those theories again. You thought you'd be done with it after Benchmark 2, but you're not. As your student teaching, you have to synthesize and make the connections between the research that's out there. That's why you need to be current about that, as well as the theory, the practice that you're actually implementing. Many of you will say you believe in, hands-on learning. There's a name for that. There's a theorist for that. You need to know it. And you need to articulate it in this edTPA.
In a couple of mine, I've actually written down a few, but that I've mentioned. So their foundations class, when you talk about the theorist, and Dr. Jill mentioned some in her class as well. Melody brings them up in her class as well. But the ones that really touched on me, being in the group that I'm being, they're in 1-year-olds. They're in the Inspire room. There's bunches of different learning, but Howard Gardner's multiple intelligence in his visual and spatial and kinesthetic and interpersonal and linguistics, all of that. I tied an entire lesson plan head to toe into every different section of how a child learns. So visually, I brought in props so the children could dress up like the zookeeper. I also brought in elements where they could, the gathering song and the movement that you do with that, so that helps with their language and their development. But then you tie that into the commentary that you're writing as well, that you are using. You can see Howard Gardner's multiple intelligence in your teaching. It's actually happening right in front of you, which is very exciting. Then you also have Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. And it's to create a language-rich environment. So I know Jamie's students are more receptive. There's not much responsive language there at all. So how do I get that to them? How do I go to the next step? How do I push them as a teacher to get them to that sweet spot of learning where they're going to start saying words and interacting? Well, you create a language-rich environment. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is you have free choice, books out that you are interacting with them on a daily basis. You have activities that are in the book that are tied into the actual story time. For example, in Head to Toe, I changed. I wasn't Jody anymore. I was the zookeeper, and I put a hat on and a coat on, and I had a bucket, and I had my animals. And that ties the children to the book. We also do, in that classroom, we did a lot of sign language, so more. So it gives them a way to communicate if they're not able to say their words. The other one that I did want to bring up that is, of course, in this class is Chomsky's language acquisition device. And that's a child's innate ability to speak. It's coming, and how are you going to help that child do that? They're going to imitate your language, so make sure you're modeling good language. They're also going to get a reward, and I don't mean a physical reward. Somebody comes up, and it breaks my heart every time. Somebody comes up and says my name for the first time. I'm like, oh, you got it! You got my name! That's a reward for them because you were excited about something that they did. And make it a habit. Always make your teaching, make your role modeling a habit for you. Do it all the time so that your students can see it.
And the last piece that you'll be learning are some new technology skills. Some of you are way more advanced in technology than I am, but some of the pieces for the edTPA really will be utilizing some of that technology. You already have a lot of it mastered because you know how to scan your things into your e-portfolio, which will be a piece of that as well, but also the video recording. And I think Jody has a couple things to say about that.
I have a lot to say about that,
Yeah.
I was not happy about the videotaping. I thought this is part of the process I'll just do. I wasn't happy about my attitude with that, but I was just going to do it and see. I was really wrong. This is where I grew as a teacher. It was amazing to me. The more I analyzed, the more I looked at the tapes, when you're teaching, you get really into the moment about teaching. You want them to get that a penguin turns its head this way, or an elephant, or a buffalo does that. And you want them to get it, but you truly miss what they're doing. So when you go back and you look at the lesson that you taught and you watch the video, you're like, oh, he got that. Totally missed it. There was 2 different places. There was a little boy that in head to toe, you shrug your shoulders like a buffalo. I would have totally missed that he understood what I was saying if I hadn't seen it on the video. And had to go back and write a commentary about it. You have to go back and you have to look at different frames and what are you seeing and what are your focus children doing. I would have missed that learning for him. The other time was a child would move their head like a penguin. And I would have missed that as well. But one of my focus children was absolutely nonverbal. He had no inkling of verbal skills. He didn't want to say anything at all. And he was one of my focus children. So we did brown bear, brown bear. And we did it, and he really wanted nothing to do with it, didn't really want to interact with it. So we put the characters of brown bear, underneath the changing table. So when I changed them every day, I would sing, brown bear, what do you see? And we'd go through the animals. And we'd do it every day. They get changed twice a day while I was in there. So that's a lot of interaction time that would have been missed if we wouldn't have done it. 2 weeks into it, I put him up there and I'm changing him and I'm like, brown bear, and I'm singing. And he goes, ba, 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 ba. And I'm like, oh, that's it. That was that light bulb moment. That's when he got what I was trying to tell him. He got the ba, he got the rhythm of the song. I was so excited, I started to cry. I grabbed the Bloggy, that's a little videotaping thing in the classroom, and I got it on tape. This is something that can be part of his assessment, but it proves that if we were consistent and we continued to do what we were doing, the children are going to get this. And I went and got Jamie, and we all got excited, and he got excited, and it continued like that. But all of those things would have never happened without the edTPA. I would have never really looked into that. I would have never tied circle time that happened in the morning or your morning meeting or whatever into transitioning, making sure that you're transitioning with that book and then diaper changing as well, as long as incorporating all of that, and then getting it on videotape. What a wonderful opportunity to show that parent at conference time, look at what we've progressed in the last 3 weeks.
I think sometimes when we're so focused on what we know, what that objective is of our lesson plan, that's all we want to make sure is they get, is that objective. But we miss all of the other learning that really surrounds them and all of those other pieces that will inform us on that next lesson plan. So I think that's part of the piece of the videotaping that's really, really crucial, and for us to be able to take a look at all the learning that's going on with children.
It's amazing.
Okay, this is my very favorite picture. Doesn't she make you feel calm? Don't you feel calm after this presentation? Okay, well, the caption says questions and comments. So what I'm going to have you do right now is talk within your groups, questions or comments that you have in relation to what we've just presented. Okay, so I'll give you a few minutes to kind of talk within your groups.
That's what I'm thinking.
Let's see what we get for questions. I love that little girl.
Is she cute? Taking it all in.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that was quick. I can hear silence. Does that mean you're ready to report back? Yeah. Okay, great. Lindsay.
The thing that we talked about is like, how do you pass it? Like, how is it something that you pass?
That's a great question that I forgot to answer. Because that's important, isn't it? How do you pass? From what my understanding is at this point, you will be sending your edTPA out to someone else, a reviewer that has been trained, somewhere in the United States, and they will be reviewing your teacher ed assessment piece. And they will be scoring it using the rubrics that are provided, and they will give you the score on your edTPA.
The other thing too is that all of your entire TPA portfolio will be downloaded on Chalk and Wire. So you know how you have Chalk and Wire for your benchmark? You'll have another one then for edTPA, so you'll actually have two.
So during your last, your student teaching placement, you'll be conducting these lessons, 3 to 5 lessons that you'll create and teach and videotape and do all of the commentaries. And then when you have written everything and we'll have those support systems in place on campus, then you'll be submitting that edTPA for review. That's a good question. Melanie, do you have one?
So is this like, it's like a portfolio type thing that we combine or we make up, or?
If you're thinking about some of the pieces, the video and the commentaries and all that, it's really no different than some of the artifacts that you already do in your portfolio. So we're using that same canister, that portfolio canister, and we've worked very closely with Chalk and Wire, so they have all of the prompts and everything right out there that you're going to write. And so that will be sort of like a separate portfolio that will be submitted.
And the other thing too is when you go into Chalk and Wire and you submit something, you're like, oh, I forgot what goes in here. They'll have a little prompt that'll explain it, or it'll take you to that part of the handbook where you can. And I'm technology minded. You folks are so far ahead of me, and I got through it. So I mean, it's a very seamless process. I thought it went.
And I'm
really
sure
well.
if any of you would like to see Jody, she'd be very happy to.
I'm
share that
around.
with you.
I'm always around. I'm either in the library or in the hallway hanging out.
And we'll have more as we keep piloting. We'll have more examples for you. So I would ask that you embark on that and take advantage of that. Okay, other questions that you have? Yes, Jennifer. Yep.
So do we take the lesson template that we've been working on and is that what we use in the lesson, or do we take the curriculum and kind of turn it into this form?
When you think about those 3 pieces of that edTPA, the planning, instruction, and the assessment, your lesson plan really kind of streamlines a lot of that, okay? Also, I think in yours, Jody, and maybe you can identify some of that, but she also, in that checklist that she had developed, she had that scanned in because that was showing how she was assessing it. So you'll be using pieces of that lesson plan and scanning that all in and then talking about it. Yeah.
And so and then not only the scanning, but your videotapes are also part of that. So there's a process of making them just a tad bit smaller, and that's easy to do as well, so that they fit on Chalk and Wire. And then that can also be an assessment piece. I actually have one where I'm laying on the floor with 2 of the children, and Jamie Spielberg, that's what we're calling her now, was videotaping. And so I was asking them what was in the book, and they were able to point to it. So that's also an assessment piece that you can use.
Did you press your button? Thank you.
Is it literacy focused, or like if you're in 3rd grade, do you focus on each curriculum area?
Because the focus of the edTPA is language development with children, I am hoping that that's what we focus on throughout, even through 3rd grade. If you think about reading in schools, that's the huge piece, right, for 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. Mm-hmm. There's now that reading test that you have to take at the end. So I think that only makes sense to document some of that piece and use that as your edTPAs, the language part. Now, what's really important is if you are doing a science lesson, you can certainly incorporate language into that science lesson. Okay? And the important thing to remember is when you're student teaching, this isn't going to be the focus of your student teaching. The edTPA isn't going to be the focus. The focus is going to be student learning. All right? And all of this is just going to be secondary. And right now that seems hard to get your arms around and your head around, but that's really what's going to happen.
I actually was with a girl that was doing her student teaching the way that they've always done it, and then I did the edTPA. And we were doing the same amount of work. It's just it was different. It was a different focus. So this isn't adding to your student teaching placement. It's enhancing it. It's taking what you know and putting it into a different format, but it's not making it any harder. I think it's actually making it more enjoyable, and I've learned more.
Yes. Melanie.
So this isn't something that like we would have to pass to graduate, but it would be something that will be in the schools when we get out there. Is that because we would be the year before 2015?
You will. Let's see. When you say it's going to be in the schools, I don't think it's going to be in the schools. I think the administrators will know about it. I don't know what this looks like. My hope is that if we're going to put in all of this effort, that wherever you go for a job, because they know that you have passed this edTPA, You are solid, you know, you have jumped all the hoops, if you will, but most importantly, you know about student learning. You will not, if all those students, the fall of 2015, will be required to send that out, and that's high stakes for them. If that grade comes back and they don't have it, they won't be getting a teaching license.
I have a sister-in-law that's a principal in Minnesota. In Minnesota, I do believe it's in place in Minnesota. All of her beginning teachers need to do an edTPA lesson plan for all the lessons that they do. As they get ingrained into their teaching and they've been there a while, it backs off where you don't do that. But she does require them to do a lesson plan, an edTPA lesson plan.
Other questions that you have? Good, thoughtful questions. Anything else? That's it? Comments then, let's go there. You're overwhelmed or you're thinking, phew, not me, yay. That's what I'd be thinking. Oh, that's not what you're thinking, right? What pieces of this are you feeling will be most challenging for students? Melanie?
I would say probably the videotaping, because some people get nervous. It's like, I don't know, it's not any different from like just the younger kids watching you, but when there's a videotape going in.
Can I tell you how nervous I am today? I don't like videotaping either. Except, you know, you can kind of go back and learn a lot about your learning as well as your teaching. So again, I think if we can take the focus off of us and think about what's best for students, because that's why you're really going into teaching.
And to be perfectly honest with you, and don't shoot daggers at me, I think you should videotape at Northwoods. Honestly, the more you do it, the more comfortable you get with it, and the more you learn from it.
The problem with the videotaping, I just have to say, is we have to work that out very carefully with school districts, because they all have their own rules and regulations. So while I'm not going to shoot a dagger back at you, I think that's a good idea, but I haven't had that conversation with Northwood. So please don't bring your cameras tonight and videotape your child learning.
No, there are, you know, agreements that the parents have to sign, and we went through that as well. But I'm just saying, as this gets in place, and there are those agreements, the more you can do it, every lesson you do, if you have the agreements and everything is in place, do it. It gets easier.
And remember that this is going to be embedded within the program. You're this far in advance and we're throwing this on you. So you're a little panicky because you're thinking, how are we ever going to learn that? Remember that we're starting right now with our freshmen, you know, and they're already getting pieces of the lesson plan in place. So as it was a struggle for us, it won't be so much for them, because they'll have all of these pieces embedded within the program. So hopefully it'll be a little bit of a smoother transition, so that when you get out there and you're videotaping, it'll just be second nature for you. That's our hope. Okay, other comments that you have? Okay, I can see that you're in a reflective mood, so guess what? I have an extension, because, oh, it's only 9 o'clock, not 11. Still 11 o'clock. The clock stood still. 2 things that I want you to do, being the reflective practitioners you are. This first handout that I have for you is I want you to think about, based on the introduction today, if you just take them, pass it up, please. I want you to think about those 3 components of, just a second here. Make sure that you have the one that says the name on the top. Yeah, I don't think you guys do. Anyway, what it's asking you to do is a little bit of a reflection. Okay, so in those 3 tasks, planning, instruction, and assessment, I want you to think about where you're at in planning, in instruction, and assessment. Okay, what are your strengths and what things do you still need in order to be effective with those 3 things? So I'm going to give you about 5-10 minutes to jot things down for me so I can have that handed in at the end. And then we're going to do a little bit of a group project. Okay, who would be willing to share with me one of the strengths that you feel that you have in planning? Nicole, I'm going to ask you to share.
Okay, I put down for planning.
Button.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Okay, I put down for planning that I am a very organized person and I have an organized mind, so the planning aspect was always easy for me because I'm constantly like making lists to make sure I have everything done. So making a list in the lesson plans was pretty easy for me.
Okay, great. Who would like to share an area that you feel in planning that you still need to work on? Thanks, Grace.
I said that I need to work on being more detailed in my plan. It's easier for me to look at the overall objective and what I want them to ultimately learn, but breaking it down and being more detailed.
Okay. So let me just ask this question, you can answer it yourselves. Had we not hit these lesson plans so hard, would you have been able to really write this response about planning? Great. What wonderful reflective practitioners you are. Okay, let's take the piece about instruction. What's one of the strengths that you have identified as a strength in your instruction piece? Chelsea, give me an example.
I said that I'm organized and prepared, and it just helps me kind of put my thoughts on paper.
Okay, let me ask you this question. In the instruction piece, you said you're organized and prepared. Would you have been that organized and prepared had you not planned for it? No. Okay, great. That's what I wanted you to say. Perfect. Okay, how about an area that needs to be worked on as far as the instruction piece goes? Okay, thank you, Nikki.
I think I said the use of language with children. I think it's very easy to talk at a lower level and not introduce newer vocabulary for the children to utilize. So I definitely try to include different vocabulary when I speak with them.
I think that's fabulous, especially when we're looking at this whole piece of the edTPA being language development. I think that's really a good thing to kind of focus on. Okay, and finally the assessment piece, which I think continually becomes a challenge even for me as a teacher. So, but give me an idea of the strength that you have as far as assessment goes. Julie?
I feel that my assessments still like focus the children on what was learned and like not a complete like different like I don't know kind of deal. Like it's still really engaging and like they want to like do the concrete evidence and like it's not just like oh here's a worksheet or something I don't want to do this but like they still want to do it.
Okay. And what area of concern do you still have as far as the assessment piece goes? Tess?
I have the opposite of what Julie just said. I said I struggle to motivate children to find the value in completing worksheets or concrete evidence that isn't entirely fun.
Do you think, and I think that's the piece, we need that concrete evidence, and we were all raised in that era where the concrete evidence was a worksheet. And yet that really goes against what we believe as early childhood teachers. And yet what's so important, and as you continually go and observe teachers, look to see the evidences that they are collecting for children so that you can kind of add that to your repertoire of ideas. Because it doesn't always have to be a worksheet, but you always have to be accountable for student learning. So gone are the days when we do something just for fun, because there's got to be some learning, and yet we have to integrate that fun piece and that engagement piece with children as well. Okay, thank you for sharing that. If you are finished, I'd like you to pass your reflection papers down to the ends of the table. And mark this down on your notes. I'm going to let you go a little bit early today. That never happens, right? But before you go, your assignment for Thursday, is there one? Thank you, your Northwoods reflection in the Dropbox on Wednesday night, hard copy to class on Thursday. But here's the other thing I want you to think about. On Thursday during class, we're going to do one more piece of this edTPA. You have all proceeded through the program and are now at the senior level, most of you, okay? There are pieces of this edTPA that have to be integrated within the program. So I want you to think about using your lesson plan as a template, where those pieces of that lesson plan, the pre-assessment, the instructional context, can be integrated within the program. What class and how. Okay, so that's your assignment. And you're never going to remember that, but I want you just to think about it, and then in class on Thursday, that's what we're going to do. Any final comments, questions, concerns, or compliments? You have never been so quiet. Repeat the question about what we're going to do?
Yeah, the question you want us to think about.
Okay. I'll try. Somebody's supposed to take notes on that. Rewind the tape. What I want you to do is think about this program and think about all the courses you've had. You've had intro, you've had infant toddler, you've had preschool, kindergarten. I want you to take that lesson plan template that you have so learned to love, right? In the instructional context and the pre-assessment, where can we embed those within the program? How can we better teach it so that those students going through the program become more successful than just being thrown on them, but they get little bits and pieces, and so finally, when they're student teaching, it's just a culmination of everything that they've learned. Is that better explained? Good, thank you for asking for clarification. Anything else? You've been a wonderful audience in this fancy schmancy place. When you leave, would you put your name cards up on the table, and then there's some lesson plans up there. And I will see you all tonight at Northwoods. Thank you.